Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Salah Abdeslam was born on September 15, 1989, in Molenbeek. This is a district in the city of Brussels, Belgium. His parents were originally from Morocco, a country in North Africa. The family had French nationality. Salah was one of 5 children. He had 3 older brothers named Brahim, Mohammed, and one younger sister. The whole family lived together in Molenbeek. Salah grew up in this neighborhood. He attended a local secondary school called Athene Royal Serge Kreutz. At school, he gained a technical qualification. After finishing school in 2009, he found a job as a mechanic. He worked for the Brussels Public Transport Company, known as STIBMIVB. His father also worked for the same company. This was a stable job for Salah. In December 2011, Salah's life began to change. He was with 3 other people, including a childhood friend named Abdelhamid Aboud. They attempted to rob a garage in a place called Attigny's, south of Brussels. The police arrested them for this attempted robbery. Salah was given a suspended sentence for this crime. This means he did not go to prison for it, but he had a criminal record. However, he had spent some months in jail waiting for his trial. Because he was in jail during that time, he lost his job at the transport company. After losing his job, Salah did not find stable work again. He alternated between temporary jobs and periods of unemployment. Starting in 2013, he began to help his older brother Brahim. Brahim ran a cafe bar in Molenbeek called Les Beguines. Salah helped with running this cafe. However, this cafe was not a normal business. It became a place where people dealt drugs. It was also a place where people watched videos from the Islamic State group. During this period of his life, Salah lived at home with his parents and his brothers. He did not follow strict religious rules at this time. He was known to drink alcohol and use cannabis. He went to nightclubs and casinos. He also had 2 more minor convictions. One was for theft, and one was for having cannabis in his possession. In the months before the Paris attacks in November 2015, his brother Mohammed noticed a change in Salah and Brahim. They stopped drinking alcohol and started to pray more often. The cafe bar they ran was closed down by the police in August 2015. The police had raided it and found evidence of drug dealing. The brothers had already sold the business lease before it was closed. Earlier in 2015, after a police raid on terrorists in a city called Verviers, an informant gave the police the names of Salah and Brahim Abdeslam. The police questioned the brothers, but did not continue to investigate them deeply. The anti-terror police unit did not have enough people to follow every lead. Also, in late October 2015, the Belgian intelligence services gave a list to the mayor of Molenbeek. This list had names of people who might have become radicalized. The names of Salah and Brahim Abdeslam were on this list. No action was taken from this list at that time. Salah Abdeslam's life continued in this way, living in Molenbeek without a regular job and having involvement with his brother's circle. In early August 2015, Salah Abdeslam made a very short trip to Greece with another man. Then, starting in late August, he began a series of car journeys. Between August 30th and October 3rd, he drove from Belgium to Hungary and Germany 5 separate times. The purpose of these trips was to collect people. These people were members of a terrorist cell who had been in Syria. They were returning to Europe using the migrant route, carrying false passports. The money for renting the cars used on these trips was provided in cash by the Islamic State group. All the people he collected would later be involved in the Paris attacks. In October 2015, Abdeslam purchased materials that could be used for bombs. He went to a fireworks shop in Saint-Ouen-l'Aumône, a suburb near Paris, France. There, he bought 12 remote detonators and several batteries. He also bought 15 liters of peroxide, a chemical that can be used to make explosives. Abdeslam was also involved in getting the vehicles for the attacks. He rented 2 of the 3 cars that would be used. He rented a Volkswagen Polo and a Renault Clio. His brother Brahim rented the 3rd car, a Seat Leon. On the evening of November 11, 2015, Abdeslam and a friend, Mohammed Abrini, drove the rented Clio from Belgium to Alfortville, a suburb in southeastern Paris. They went there to book 2 hotel rooms at an apart city hotel for the attackers who would come to Paris. A surveillance camera at a service station filmed them on this journey. His brother Brahim had already rented a house in Bobigny, another Paris suburb, near the Stade de France Stadium. In the early hours of November 12th, Abdeslam drove to a hideout in Charleroi, Belgium. There, he met with other cell members including Abdelhamid Abaoud and Mohammed Abrini. That afternoon, they left for Paris. One group drove in the Clio and the Seat Leon. Another group drove in the Polo from a different hideout in Brussels. When they reached Paris, the Clio and Seat went to the house in Bobigny. The men who would attack the Bataclan Theater spent the night in the Alfortville Hotel. During that night, Mohammed Abrini took a taxi back to Brussels. This left 10 men in Paris to carry out the attacks. On the evening of November 13, 2015, Salah Abdeslam drove a car. In the car were 3 men who would be suicide bombers. He drove them to the Stade de France Stadium, north of Paris in Saint-Denis. At 9:16 p.m., the first bomber detonated his explosive vest outside the stadium. This explosion marked the start of the coordinated attacks. 2 more bombers detonated their vests at the stadium shortly after. 1 person was killed by these blasts. While this happened, another group of attackers, including Abdeslam's brother Brahim, drove through the 10th and 11th districts of Paris. They stopped at several café and restaurant terraces. They used automatic rifles to shoot people sitting outside. They killed 39 people. Afterwards, Brahim Abdeslam entered a café on Boulevard Voltaire and detonated his suicide vest, killing himself. A 3rd group of attackers arrived at the Bataclan concert hall. A band was playing to a full crowd of about 1,500 people. These attackers entered with automatic rifles and began shooting the audience. They killed 90 people inside the theater. The total number of people killed that night across all locations was 130. More than 490 people were injured. Salah Abdeslam was also wearing an explosive suicide vest that evening. After dropping off the stadium bombers, he did not detonate his vest. He later claimed he went to a bar in the 18th district of Paris with the intention of blowing himself up, but changed his mind. Investigators and the court later believed the vest had simply malfunctioned and failed to explode. After abandoning his plan, at around 10 p.m., he parked his car in the place Albert Kahn in the 18th district. He left a kitchen knife in the car. About 30 minutes later, he activated a new mobile phone with a SIM card he bought nearby. This phone allowed police to later trace his movements. He traveled to the suburb of Châtillon in southwest Paris. There, he discarded his suicide vest in a pile of rubbish. He bought food at a McDonald's. He then spent a couple of hours with 2 young men in the stairwell of an apartment building. During the night, he called 2 friends from Molenbeek, Mohammed Amri and Hamza Atou. He asked them to come to Paris and drive him back to Brussels. They agreed. They arrived in Châtillon around 5 a.m. on November 14th and picked him up. On the drive back to Belgium, a service station surveillance camera recorded their car. They passed through 2 police checkpoints on the road. They were not stopped because, although Abdeslam's name had been found on the rental document for the car left at the Bataclan, it was not yet in all police computers. Once back in Brussels, Abdeslam went to buy new clothes and a new mobile phone. He went to a barber to change his hairstyle and appearance. Another friend, Ali Al-Qadi, then drove him to a hideout in the Schaerbeek district of Brussels. He was now a wanted man, but he was in hiding. On November 15, 2015, French and Belgian authorities released Salah Abdeslam's name and photograph to the public. He became the most wanted man in Europe. A massive police manhunt began. Despite this, Abdeslam managed to stay hidden in Brussels for 4 months. He moved between several safe houses. First, he stayed for 2 weeks in an apartment on the Rue Henri Berghe in the Schaerbeek district with other members of the terrorist cell. These men were planning further attacks. He then spent a few days in a hideout on the Avenue de l'Exposition in the Jeddah district. Finally, he was moved to an apartment at 60 Rue du Dries in the Forest district. On March 15, 2016, Belgian and French police conducted a raid on the Forest apartment. They believed it was empty because the electricity had been cut off. However, when they entered, they were met with gunfire from inside. One of the men inside, Mohammed Belkade, shot at the police. While Belkade kept the police occupied, Abdeslam and another man, Sofian Ayari, escaped through a back window. Police reinforcements arrived. A police sniper shot and killed Belkade. 4 police officers were injured during this shootout. Inside the apartment, police found a cache of weapons, an Islamic State flag, and Abdeslam's fingerprints. After escaping, Abdeslam contacted his cousin, Abida Birkin. His cousin agreed to hide Abdeslam and Ayari in his mother's apartment in Molenbeek. However, Birkin was already under police surveillance. This allowed the police to track Abdeslam to this new location. On March 18, 2016, police raided the apartment at 79 Rue de Katervents in Molenbeek. As Abdeslam tried to run away, he was shot in the leg by police and captured. Sofian Ayari was also arrested. Abdeslam was taken to a hospital for his leg wound. The next day, he was transferred to the high-security prison in Bruges. He was formally charged with terrorist murder and belonging to a terrorist group. When questioned the day after his arrest, he initially cooperated. He admitted to renting the cars and hotel rooms and to driving the bombers to the Stade de France. Soon after, he decided to use his right to remain silent and stopped answering questions. On April 27, 2016, he was extradited from Belgium to France under a European arrest warrant. He was placed in a prison called Fleury-Mérogis, south of Paris, and put under formal investigation for murder and attempted murder linked to terrorism. His first trial took place in Brussels in February 2018. He and Sofian Ayari were tried for the attempted murder of police officers during the Forest shootout. Abdeslam attended the first day, but then refused to come to court. He was found guilty. On April 23, 2018, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for this crime. The main trial for the Paris attacks began in Paris on September 8, 2021. It lasted nearly 10 months. Abdeslam and 19 other defendants were tried in a specially built courtroom. During the trial, Abdeslam broke his long silence. He told the court that on the night of the attacks, he had gone to a bar in Paris with his suicide vest, but had changed his mind at the last minute. The prosecution argued and presented forensic evidence that the vest had simply malfunctioned. The court agreed with the prosecution. On June 29, 2022, the verdict was announced. Salah Abdeslam was found guilty of all charges, including murder and terrorism. He was given a full life sentence without the possibility of parole. This is the most severe sentence in French law. After this trial, he was sent back to Belgium to face another trial for his involvement in the 2016 Brussels bombings. That trial began in December 2022. On July 25, 2023, a jury found him guilty of terrorist murder and attempted murder related to those attacks. However, because he already had a life sentence from France and a 20-year sentence from Belgium for connected crimes, Belgian law prevented the court from adding more prison time. Belgian authorities later transferred him back to France to serve his full life sentence. Salah Abdeslam remains in a French prison, serving a sentence that will likely keep him incarcerated for the rest of his life. Story 2. Mohammed Lahouaj Boulal was born on January 3, 1985 in Msaken, Tunisia. This is a small town near the coast. He grew up there with his parents, a brother, and a sister. His family was not very religious. His parents later divorced, which was not very common in their community. This event changed the family structure. As a child and teenager, Mohammed was described as quiet. He finished his basic schooling in Tunisia. He did not go to university. He learned to drive and did various jobs that involved delivery or transportation. In 2005, when he was 20 years old, he got a legal permit to live in France. He moved to the city of Nice on the French Riviera. In Nice, he found work as a delivery driver for a food company. He drove a small truck. He earned enough money to live on his own. He enjoyed sports, especially boxing and martial arts. He also liked to go out to salsa dance clubs at night. He did not pray regularly or follow Islamic customs like fasting during Ramadan. His social life was more about going out and meeting people than religion. Around 2009, he married a woman who was a French-Tunisian cousin. This marriage was partly arranged by their families. Together, they had 3 children. From the outside, they seemed like a normal family. However, their relationship was not happy. Mohammed's wife later told lawyers that he had a very bad temper. He would shout and break things at home. He was physically violent towards her on several occasions. She reported this violence to the police more than once. Mohammed's behavior at work also began to change. He became known for having a short fuse. He would get into arguments easily. In early 2016, he was driving a van for work and fell asleep at the wheel. This caused an accident. His company fired him because of this. He was now without a job. His personal life was also falling apart. He and his wife formally separated. He moved into a small apartment by himself. He began to see other people. He had relationships with different women and also with men. He spent a lot of time on his phone and computer. He started to look at violent videos online. His family in Tunisia said he had suffered from depression and nervous breakdowns in the past. They said he would get very angry and was unstable. In March 2016, he had a fight with another driver after a small traffic accident. He hit the other man with a wooden pallet. For this crime of violence with a weapon, he went to court. He received a 6-month prison sentence, but it was suspended. This meant he did not go to jail as long as he did not break the law again. He was on probation when he left the court. Around this time, people who knew him noticed small changes. He let his beard grow, which was new for him. When asked about it, he said it was for religious reasons. He had never shown much interest in religion before. He also sent a large sum of money, almost 100,000 euros, to his family in Tunisia just a few days before a national holiday in France. No one knew exactly where he got all that money. In the days leading up to July 14, 2016, Mohammed Lahouaj Boulal began to act on a plan. July 14th is Bastille Day, a major French national holiday. He knew there would be a large fireworks display on the Promenade d'Anglais in Nice, a wide sidewalk by the sea. He knew thousands of people, including families with children, would gather there in the evening. To carry out his plan, he needed a large vehicle. On July 4th, he went to a rental company in Nice. He rented a 19-ton refrigerated truck. He told the rental agent he needed it for moving furniture. He kept the truck for several days. During this time, he practiced driving it. He also used it to visit the Promenade des Anglais many times. On July 12th and 13th, he drove the rented truck to the promenade. He walked around and took pictures of the area with his phone. He studied the layout, the security barriers, and where the crowds would likely be. On the morning of July 14th, he made final preparations. He placed a fake pistol, a replica rifle, and a non-functional grenade inside the cab of the truck. He also had a real 7.65mm pistol and several bullets. He did not tell anyone about his plans. In the afternoon, he sent a text message to a person he knew, asking them to get more weapons. That person did not reply or help him. As evening fell, he parked the truck in a side street near the promenade. He waited. At about 10:30 p.m., the fireworks show over the Mediterranean Sea ended. The crowd of thousands of people began to leave. They walked slowly along the Promenade des Anglais. Many were families walking back to their cars or hotels. The mood was happy and relaxed. At that moment, Lahuage Bullel started the truck's engine. He drove onto the Promenade des Anglais at a point where temporary barriers were weak. He first drove at a normal speed, not drawing attention. Then, once fully on the pedestrian walkway, he accelerated sharply. He drove the large truck directly into the dense crowd of people. He drove for approximately 1.2 miles along the promenade. He swerved from side to hit as many people as possible. People tried to run away, but the area was crowded and there was little space to escape. The truck was moving too fast. For 2 minutes, the truck plowed through the crowd. It caused terrible injuries and killed many people immediately. Police officers were present for the holiday security. They quickly reacted to the screams and chaos. They ran after the truck. They shouted at the driver to stop. He did not stop. They fired their guns at the truck's cab, trying to shoot the driver through the windshield. Inside the cab, Lahuage Bullel was also shooting at the police with his real pistol, but he did not hit anyone. Finally, after the long drive through the crowd, the truck slowed down. Police bullets had hit the driver. The truck came to a full stop. Police officers surrounded the vehicle. They opened the driver's door. They found Lahuage Bullel inside, dead from multiple gunshot wounds. The attack was over. On the promenade, there was immediate chaos and tragedy. The truck had hit 520 people. Many were killed by the impact. Many more were badly injured, lying on the ground. Bystanders, police, and emergency workers tried to help the wounded. Ambulances arrived quickly. The scene was filled with noise, crying, and confusion. The police secured the area around the truck. They began to treat it as a major crime scene. After the truck stopped, the police immediately began an investigation. The first step was to identify the driver. They found his body in the cab and identified him quickly using documents from his apartment. They confirmed he was Mohammed Lahuage Bullel. Police then searched his small apartment. They took his computer, phone, and other personal items. They also searched the rented truck very carefully. The truck itself was a key piece of evidence. Police found the fake weapons and the real pistol inside. They examined the path he drove. They measured the distance and marked every place where people were hit. They collected video from city security cameras, local businesses, and phones from people in the crowd. This video evidence showed the truck's route and the driver's actions clearly. The most important evidence came from Lahuage Bullel's mobile phone. Police experts unlocked it and looked at his messages, internet searches, and photos. They found that in the days before the attack, he had searched for violent topics online. He had looked for news articles about deadly traffic accidents. He had also searched for Islamic State propaganda videos and images of their flag. On his phone, he had photos of the Promenade des Anglais, taken days earlier, proving he had studied the location. The phone also showed text messages and calls. Police used this information to find other people he had contacted. They discovered that in the weeks before the attack, he had asked several people for help to get guns. 5 people were arrested because of these communications. The police believed these people might have known about his plans or helped him prepare. The investigation showed he had acted alone during the attack itself, but the police and prosecutors believed he had been inspired by extremist ideas he found online. They found no evidence that he was a formal member of a terrorist group. He had not been on any French security watch list before the attack. The judicial process focused on the 5 people who were arrested. They were put on trial for helping Lahouaj Bulel in different ways. Some were accused of giving him a pistol earlier in the year. Others were accused of knowing about his violent plans, but not telling the police. The trial lasted for weeks. Witnesses, including victims and their families, gave statements about the impact of the attack. In December 2022, a French court gave its verdict. 3 of the 5 people were found guilty of being connected to terrorist activity. They received prison sentences ranging from 2 to 18 years. The other 2 were found not guilty of the terrorism charges, but were given smaller sentences for other crimes, like weapons offenses. The court stated that Lahouaj Bulel was solely responsible for the murderous attack, but these helpers played a role in his preparations. For the victims and their families, the aftermath was long and difficult. Many people suffered severe, life-changing injuries. They required years of medical care and therapy. A special fund was set up by the French government to provide financial help to the victims. Memorials were built on the Promenade d'Anglais to remember those who were killed. The story of the Nice attack ended with the courts confirming the lone responsibility of the driver and sentencing those who assisted him, while the city and its people continued to remember and heal from the tragedy. Story 3. Reinhard Sinaga was born on February 19, 1983, in Jambi, a city on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. He did not grow up there. His family moved to Depok, a city near the capital, Jakarta, when he was young. He grew up in an affluent household, meaning his family had a lot of money. His father worked as a banker and later in the palm oil business. His mother took care of the home. The family was ethnically Batak and were conservative Catholics. Religion was an important part of their family life. As a child and teenager, Sinaga was seen as polite and well-behaved. He focused on his studies. There were no obvious signs of trouble or strange behavior reported from his time in school in Indonesia. He was a good student. After finishing high school, he went to university. He studied architecture at the University of Indonesia in Depok. He completed his degree in 2006. In August 2007, Sinaga moved to the United Kingdom. He entered the country on a student visa. He began studying at the University of Manchester in England. In 2009, he finished a master's degree in urban planning. He then began another master's degree, this time in sociology. He completed that degree in 2011. He was considered a dedicated student by his teachers. After his studies, Sinaga stayed in Manchester. In 2012, he began studying for a PhD at the University of Leeds. His research topic was about the lives of gay and bisexual South Asian men in Manchester. He submitted his PhD thesis in August 2016. The university judged it as a failure. However, they gave him a chance to rewrite it and submit it again. At the time of the events that would later come to light, he was still working on rewriting this thesis. Financially, Sinaga did not need a job. His father in Indonesia sent him money regularly. This allowed Sinaga to live in a modern, privately rented apartment in the center of Manchester. His apartment was close to an area with many bars and nightclubs, known as the Gay Village. In Manchester, Sinaga lived openly as a gay man. He was social and had many friends. He attended a local Church of England congregation, St. Chrysostom's Church, where he was known as a friendly member. His social life involved going out to clubs and bars. He was a familiar face in the nightlife of the city. To his friends and acquaintances, he seemed like a normal, friendly postgraduate student with no obvious problems. Sinaga used his apartment in central Manchester as a place to commit crimes. His method followed a consistent pattern. He would go out alone late at night, often between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. He positioned himself near nightclubs and pubs where people were leaving to go home. He looked for young men who appeared alone, disoriented, or drunk. Many had just argued with friends or girlfriends. Sinaga would approach these men. He acted kindly and concerned. He would say he lived nearby and offer them a place to wait for a taxi, to charge their phone, or to have a drink of water or alcohol. Because he seemed friendly and harmless, many of the men accepted his offer. They went with him to his apartment, which was only a short walk away. Once inside his apartment, Sinaga would offer the man a drink. He had already put a powerful sedative drug, believed to be GHB, into the drink. This drug is colorless and tasteless. The man would drink it and quickly become unconscious. The drug caused a deep, sleep-like state. Often the men would vomit while unconscious. When the victim was unconscious and could not move or resist, Sinaga would sexually assault him. He would rape the man. He almost never used a condom. During these assaults, Sinaga used his mobile phone to make video recordings. He filmed the faces of the unconscious men and his own actions. He stored these videos on his phone and on external hard drives. After the assault, the drug would slowly wear off. The victim would wake up, often confused and feeling very ill. They would find themselves in a strange apartment with no memory of what had happened. Sinaga would then play the role of a good host. He would pretend to be helpful and act as if the man had simply drunk too much and passed out. Feeling embarrassed and still disoriented, the victims would often apologize to Sinaga for the trouble. They would then leave his apartment. Most had no memory of the rape and did not report it to the police. Sinaga did this many times. He kept items taken from the men as trophies. He took their phones, IDs, bank cards, and watches. He sometimes used these items to find the men on social media platforms like Facebook. He would send them friend requests. If they accepted, he could see more details of their lives. On his own phone, Sinaga used messaging apps like WhatsApp. He talked to friends in group chats. He would brag about his actions. He called himself Super A. He told his friends that he enjoyed turning straight men. He saw it as a game or a sport. In one message, he wrote about a victim, saying he had saved the straight boy from his monstrous girlfriend. This continued for years. The first crime that was later proven in court happened on New Year's Day in 2015. The victim was a heterosexual man who woke up covered in vomit in Sinaga's apartment. He had no memory of the night, but felt sick and violated. He apologized to Sinaga and left. He had been raped twice while unconscious. In June 2017, Sinaga found his last victim. This was an 18-year-old man, an amateur rugby player. The young man had been out with friends. Sinaga followed his normal method. He brought the man to his apartment, offered him a drugged drink, and the man lost consciousness. However, this time the young man began to wake up during the assault. He realized what was happening. He fought back violently against Sinaga. A physical struggle took place in the apartment. The rugby player was strong and beat Sinaga severely. The noise and commotion alerted a neighbor, who called the police. When the police arrived, they found Sinaga badly injured. They also found the young man, who was distressed and explained he had been assaulted. At first, the police did not understand the full situation. They arrested the young man on suspicion of causing serious harm to Sinaga. Sinaga was taken to the hospital for his injuries. After the fight in June 2017, the police began a routine investigation. They went to the hospital where Sinaga was being treated for his injuries. The officers collected his personal belongings from the hospital room for safekeeping. These belongings included his mobile phone. The police then interviewed the young rugby player. His account of being drugged and assaulted was taken seriously. This led the police to look at Sinaga's phone as part of their evidence gathering. A police digital forensics expert examined the contents of Sinaga's phone. On the phone, the expert found a large number of video files. When they opened these videos, they showed unconscious men being sexually assaulted by Sinaga. The videos were very clear and showed the faces of the men and Sinaga's actions. The police also found external hard drives in Sinaga's apartment. In total, they discovered over 3 terabytes of video evidence. This is equal to about 300 hours of footage. The police now understood that Sinaga was a serial offender. They created a major investigation team. The first task was to identify the men in the videos. Many victims were identifiable because Sinaga had kept their stolen possessions. Police used driver's licenses, student IDs, bank cards, and phones found in Sinaga's flat to find names. They also traced some men through the social media friend requests Sinaga had sent. Officers contacted these men carefully and sensitively. Most had no idea they had been attacked. They only remembered meeting a friendly man and then waking up feeling ill. The evidence was so vast that the Crown Prosecution Service decided to split the case into 4 separate trials. This was to make the legal process more manageable. In total, 48 victims were identified from the videos and would testify. Sinaga was charged with many crimes against these 48 men. The charges included rape, sexual assault, and attempted rape. Police believed he had actually assaulted at least 206 men, but they could not find all of them. At his trials, Sinaga pleaded not guilty to every charge. His defense lawyer argued that all the sexual activity was consensual. Sinaga claimed the men were pretending to be asleep as part of a sexual game he called dead fishing. The jury saw the video evidence. They could hear the victims snoring deeply and saw them completely unconscious and unresponsive. They did not believe Sinaga's story. The jury found him guilty on all counts related to the 48 identified victims. He was convicted of 159 offenses, including 136 rapes. During the sentencing, the judge, Susan Goddard, spoke directly to Sinaga. She told him he was a highly dangerous, cunning, and deceitful man. She said he would never be safe to be released from prison. Because of the number and severity of the crimes, she gave him a life sentence. He would have to serve a minimum of 30 years in prison before he could even ask for parole. Later, in December 2020, the Court of Appeal increased this minimum term to 40 years. His earliest possible release date is in 2060, when he will be 77 years old. After the trials, police set up a special hotline for other potential victims to come forward. Charities supporting male survivors of sexual abuse reported a large increase in calls following the news of the case. In prison, Sinaga was first held at HMP Manchester and was later moved to a more secure prison, HMP Wakefield. In July 2023, it was reported that he had been attacked by another inmate in prison. The final sentence that closes the story is, Reinhard Sinaga remains in prison, serving a life sentence for his crimes. Story 4. Marie Delphine McCarty was born on March 19, 1787, in New Orleans. At that time, New Orleans was a Spanish colony. Her family, the McCartys, were very wealthy and important people in the city. They were part of the high society, known as Creoles. Her father was Louis Barthélemy de McCarty. Her mother was Marie Jean Larrable. Delphine was one of 5 children in the family. From a very young age, Delphine was surrounded by luxury and social position. Her uncle by marriage was the Spanish governor of Louisiana. Her cousin later became the mayor of New Orleans. This meant she grew up expecting a life of privilege and respect. Her childhood was during a time when many slave owners in places like New Orleans were very afraid of slave rebellions. There had been uprisings in nearby areas. This fear was common among people who owned slaves, but it is simply noted here as part of the general atmosphere of her youth. When Delphine was only 13 years old, she married for the first time. Her husband was Don Ramon de Lopez Huangulo, a high-ranking Spanish officer. They were married in June 1800 at the St. Louis Cathedral. A few years later, in 1804, her husband was called to travel to Spain for his work. Delphine, who was pregnant, traveled with him. On the way, in Havana, her husband died suddenly. Soon after his death, Delphine gave birth to their daughter, a girl named Marie Borja, who was called Borquita. Delphine then returned to New Orleans as a young widow with a baby. In June 1808, when she was about 21 years old, Delphine married a second time. Her new husband was Jean Blanc, a successful banker, lawyer, and politician. He bought a large house for them on Royal Street. During this marriage, Delphine had 4 more children, 3 daughters and a son. Her life continued to be one of wealth and social activity. Jean Blanc died in 1816, leaving Delphine a widow for the second time. On June 25, 1825, Delphine married for a third time. Her new husband was a doctor named Leonard Louis Nicholas Lalaurie. He was 15 years younger than she was. In 1831, Delphine bought a new piece of property at 1140 Royal Street. She managed this property herself. In 1832, she had a large, 2-story mansion built on the land. The mansion included living quarters for the enslaved people she owned. She lived in this mansion with Dr. Lalaurie and 2 of her daughters from her previous marriage. During this time, Delphine Lalaurie was a famous hostess in New Orleans. She held parties and was at the center of social life. However, her marriage to Dr. Lalaurie was not happy. In November 1832, she went to court to ask for a legal separation from him. She said he treated her so badly that living together was impossible. Some of her children supported her claim. It appears they may have reconciled later, as they were still living in the same house afterward. Delphine Lalaurie's life, up to this point, was marked by wealth, high social status, marriage, motherhood, and the management of her property and the enslaved people who worked for her. Delphine Lalaurie continued to live in her Royal Street mansion, appearing to society as a respectable woman. However, behind the walls of her home, she was extremely cruel to the enslaved people she owned. Her treatment of them was a hidden part of her daily life, separate from her social appearances. The crimes were not a single event, but a pattern of ongoing torture and abuse. One method she used was imprisonment. She kept several enslaved people locked in the attic rooms of the mansion. These rooms were like cells. The people inside were often chained by their ankles or necks to the walls or to heavy objects. They were given very little food and water. They were also beaten regularly with whips and other instruments. One specific victim was an elderly woman who worked as the cook in the kitchen. Madame Lalaurie kept this woman chained to the stove by her ankle at all times. The cook was not given enough food and was afraid of being punished for even small mistakes. Other victims included enslaved children. Public records later showed that between 1830 and 1834, 12 enslaved people died in the mansion. Among them were a woman named Bon and her 4 young children. The recorded causes of death were not listed, but their frequent deaths were unusual. The first time the public became suspicious was because of an incident with a young enslaved girl. The girl was roughly 8 or 12 years old, depending on different accounts. She was brushing Madame Lalaurie's hair when she hit a tangle. This angered Madame Lalaurie, who chased the girl with a whip. The girl tried to escape by running onto the roof of the mansion. She fell from the roof and died from the fall. Madame Lalaurie had the girl's body buried quickly on the property. A neighbor witnessed this event and reported it to the local authorities. Because of this report, a lawyer was sent by the city to inspect the conditions of the enslaved people at the mansion. Madame Lalaurie was warned about the laws concerning the treatment of enslaved people. During this official visit, the lawyer was shown only certain areas and people. He did not see the attic or the imprisoned victims. He found no legal reason to charge Madame Lalaurie at that time. After this, she was forced by a court to sell 9 of her enslaved people. However, she arranged for a relative to buy them at the auction and then return them to her secretly. They were brought back to the mansion, and the abuse continued. The event that finally exposed the crimes was a fire. On April 10, 1834, a fire started in the kitchen of the Royal Street Mansion. The fire spread, and neighbors called for help. Firefighters and police arrived. They found the elderly cook still chained to the stove. The cook told them she had started the fire on purpose. She said she did it as a suicide attempt because she was so afraid of being taken upstairs for punishment. She said that people who were taken to the upstairs rooms never came back. Hearing this, people at the scene demanded the keys to the attic and other locked rooms. Dr. Lalaurie and Madame Lalaurie refused to give them the keys. The bystanders and officials then broke down the doors. Inside the attic, they found 7 enslaved people alive, but in terrible condition. They were barely alive and showed signs of long-term torture. They were tied in painful positions and showed many wounds. Some wore spiked metal collars that cut into their skin. Their bodies showed evidence of being beaten, starved, and mutilated over a long period. The victims were removed from the house and taken to a local jail for their safety and for medical care. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the city. A large and angry crowd of citizens gathered at the Royal Street Mansion. They were furious at what had been found. The crowd broke into the house and began to destroy everything inside. They smashed furniture, tore down curtains, and broke windows. They damaged the house so badly that only the outer walls were left standing. The police and sheriff arrived to control the mob, but the mansion was already ruined. After the fire and the discovery of the tortured victims, the city authorities took the surviving enslaved people to the local jail. This was done to protect them and to allow a doctor to care for their injuries. The jail also became a place where the public could come and see the victims for themselves. Over the next few days, thousands of people visited the jail. They saw the severe wounds and the poor condition of the survivors. This public viewing confirmed the stories of brutality and made the people of New Orleans even more angry. The police began a formal investigation into the crimes at the Royal Street Mansion. Judges took statements from witnesses, including the fire marshal, the neighbors who helped break down the doors, and the officials who first entered the attic. One judge, Jean-François Canonge, gave a detailed statement. He described finding an enslaved woman wearing an iron collar and an old woman with a deep head wound who was too weak to walk. He also stated that when he questioned Dr. Lalaurie about the conditions, the doctor was rude and told him to mind his own business. During the investigation, people also searched the grounds of the mansion. In the courtyard, they dug up the earth and discovered human bones. These included the remains of the young girl who had fallen from the roof years earlier. They also found other bodies, suggesting that some victims had been buried secretly on the property. The total number of deaths linked to Madame Lalaurie was never fully known, but these discoveries provided more evidence of fatal abuse. However, during the chaos following the fire and the mob's destruction of the house, Delphine Lalaurie and her family escaped. They left New Orleans before the police could arrest them. With the help of family connections, they took a carriage to the docks. They boarded a schooner ship and sailed to Mobile, Alabama. From there, they booked passage on another ship going to France. They settled in Paris, where Lalaurie's mother and sisters were already living. Because the United States and France had no extradition treaty at that time, she was safe from American law. Back in New Orleans, the legal case could not proceed without the main suspect. The public outrage slowly faded because there was no one to put on trial. The ruined mansion on Royal Street stood empty and damaged for years. It was a constant reminder of the crimes, but no justice was served in court. The enslaved survivors remained under medical care, and their stories were part of the official city records. Years later, in August 1842, LaLaurie's son, Paulin Blanc, wrote a letter from New Orleans to his brother-in-law in France. In the letter, he wrote that his mother, Delphine LaLaurie, wanted to return to New Orleans. She did not seem to understand the seriousness of her crimes or why she had to leave. Her son and other relatives strongly advised her against returning. They knew she would face immediate arrest and public hatred. Because of her family's pressure, she eventually gave up her plan to return. Delphine LaLaurie lived the rest of her life in France. She died in Paris on December 7, 1849, at the age of 62. She was never arrested, tried, or legally punished for her actions. The mansion in New Orleans was eventually rebuilt by a new owner years after she had fled. It changed hands many times over the decades, used for many different purposes, but the story of what happened there remained part of the city's history. The legacy of her crimes lived on as a dark chapter in the story of New Orleans, a confirmed fact of brutal cruelty that escaped formal justice but was never forgotten. Story 5. Henri Desire Landru was born in Paris, France, on April 12, 1869. His family was working class but respectable. His father, Julien, worked as a furnace stoker and later became a factory manager. His mother, Flore, was a seamstress who worked from their home. Both parents were very religious Catholics. Landru attended a Catholic school on the Isle St. Louis in Paris. He was described as a serious and diligent student. He served as an altar boy at church and later became a subdeacon, which showed his early involvement in religious activities. After finishing school, he got a job in an architect's office. When he was 20 years old, Landru was performing his mandatory military service. During this time, he began a relationship with his cousin, Marie-Catherine Remy. She became pregnant. To take responsibility, Landru married her in Paris on October 7, 1893. Their first child, a daughter named Marie, had been born 2 years earlier. After completing his military service in 1894, Landru returned to Paris to live with his wife. The couple went on to have 3 more children, Maurice in 1894, Suzanne in 1896, and Charles in 1900. Landru struggled to find and keep a steady job. He worked in many different roles. He was an accountant, a furniture salesman, a map maker, and an assistant toy maker. During the 1890s, his wife worked as a laundress to help support the family. In the early years of their marriage, Marie-Catherine later described Landru as a model husband. However, she also told police that he was always interested in other women, even from the beginning. Landru had ambitions to become an inventor. In 1898, he designed an early model of a motorbike called the Landru. To fund this project, he collected money from investors for a factory he said he would build. This factory did not exist. This was his first known act of fraud. He continued to devise schemes, like plans for a suburban railway and an automated toy, but these ventures were not successful. He began to spend more time away from his family. His first official conviction by the law came on July 21, 1904. He was found guilty of fraud and sentenced to 2 years in Fraynes prison. He had been arrested after attempting to commit bank fraud. While in custody before his trial, he made what some believed was a fake suicide attempt. A well-known criminal psychiatrist examined him and concluded Landru was legally sane and responsible for his actions. The doctor did warn Landru's wife that he could be a dangerous man. Between 1902 and 1914, Landru was in and out of prison for various frauds. In 1909, he tried to swindle a wealthy widow in the city of Lille. He pretended to be a single businessman and convinced her to give him her savings. He was caught when he tried to cash her investment certificates and was sentenced to 3 years in loose prison. While he was in prison, his mother died in 1909. After his release in 1912, his father, Julian, died by suicide. He hanged himself in a park, reportedly out of shame over his son's criminal life. In the winter of 1913 into 1914, Landru carried out his biggest fraud before the war. He convinced multiple investors to give him money for another fake automobile factory. He collected 35,600 francs. Just before the police came to arrest him in April 1914, he fled with this money. In July 1914, he was tried in his absence, found guilty for the 6th time, and sentenced to 4 years of hard labor, followed by banishment for life to a prison colony. Because he used false names and moved often, he avoided capture. He was a wanted fugitive when World War I began in August 1914. When World War I began in August 1914, Henri Landru saw a new opportunity. Millions of French men were sent to fight, and many were killed. This left many women alone as widows. Newspapers printed many personal advertisements from these lonely women seeking companionship or marriage. Landru, who was 45 and not required to be a soldier, decided to use these ads to find victims. He placed his own advertisements in papers like Le Journal. He pretended to be a respectable, sad widower. One ad read, "Widower with 2 children, aged 43, comfortable income, affectionate, serious, and moving in good society, desires to meet widow with a view to matrimony." Many women replied to his ads. Landru was very organized. He used small notebooks to carefully list the women who wrote to him. He gave them codes based on how much money he thought they had. He put some in a category called probably has assets. He ignored those he marked as no money. He would write back to the women who seemed wealthy and lonely. He used different fake names like Raymond Dyard or Georges Fremiet. His method was always the same. First, he would meet a woman and charm her with polite, serious conversation. He promised marriage and a stable future. After gaining her trust, he would convince her to sell her furniture and belongings, saying they would start a new life together. He would then take her to a house he had rented. In December 1914, he rented a house called Villa Hermitage in Verneuillet, a town northwest of Paris. His first known victims were Jean Cuchet, a 39-year-old widow, and her 17-year-old son, André. Landru had met Jean before the war. He charmed her and promised to marry her and find a job for her son. Jean's family did not trust Landru, but she did not listen to them. In December, she and her son moved into the Verneuillet house with Landru. They were last seen alive in late January 1915. Soon after, neighbors saw thick, bad-smelling smoke coming from the chimney of Landru's house. A policeman came to ask about the smoke. Landru said he was just burning trash. The policeman believed him and left. Landru had killed Jean and André and burned their bodies in the kitchen stove. Landru continued this pattern. In June 1915, he met a 46-year-old widow named Therese Labordline. He convinced her he would marry her. She sold her furniture and went to his villa. She was seen in the garden but disappeared after June 26th. Landru later sold her property. In August 1915, he met a 51-year-old retired housekeeper named Marie-Angelique Gillen. She had some inheritance money. He told her a story about becoming a consul in Australia and needing a wife to host parties. She believed him. She moved to his villa on August 2nd and vanished around August 3rd. Landru went to her bank, pretended to be her brother-in-law, and took her money. By the end of 1915, neighbors in Verneuillet were becoming suspicious of the strange man and the women who visited but never seemed to leave. Landru felt he needed a more private place. In December 1915, he rented an isolated villa in the small village of Gambais. The house was called L'Hermitage. It was 300 meters from the nearest neighbor. Soon after moving in, he bought a large new kitchen oven and a big supply of coal. His first victim at Gambais was Berthe Hien, a 55-year-old widow. He met her through his ads and told her he was a businessman moving to Tunisia. He convinced her to sell everything. On December 8, 1915, he bought train tickets, one round-trip ticket for himself and a one-way ticket for her. She went to Gambais and was never seen again. Landru burned her body in his new oven. Later, he sent postcards to her friends, forging her handwriting to say she was traveling and doing well. In December 1916, he killed Anna Kalam, a 44-year-old typist who had saved 10,000 francs. Her family was suspicious of Landru, but she was determined to marry him. She visited his Gambais villa and disappeared after December 27th. In April 1917, Landru killed a 19-year-old woman named André Béblé. She was not a wealthy widow. He met her crying at a Paris train station after she had argued with her mother. He let her stay in his Paris room for a time. He then took her to Gambais. She was seen learning to ride a bicycle nearby. She vanished after April 12th. Prosecutors later thought he might have killed her because she saw something she should not have, or because he simply grew tired of her. His next victim was Célestine Buisson, a 47-year-old widow, in September 1917. She had saved money from her late husband's business. Landru wrote to her for over 2 years, always delaying the marriage with excuses about lost papers. He finally convinced her to come to Gambais. He bought the tickets, one round trip, one one-way. She disappeared. Landru then went to her apartment with a forged letter, claimed she was away running a canteen for soldiers, and sold all her furniture. He killed Louise Jaume, a 38-year-old divorce shop assistant, in November 1917. He even went to church with her to gain her trust. After she went to Gambais, he took money from her bank account. In April 1918, he killed Amory Pascal, a 36-year-old dressmaker. She was afraid of him and wrote to her aunt saying, "When he looks at me with those eyes, it chills me." Despite her fear, she went with him to Gambais and vanished. Landru's last known victim was Marie-Therese Marchadier, a 37-year-old woman who ran a boarding house in January 1919. She was in debt. Landru needed money himself and promised to marry her. On January 13, 1919, he was seen taking her to Gambais, carrying bags of coal. She disappeared that day. On January 16th, neighbors complained again about terrible, sickening smoke coming from the chimney of the Gambais villa. During all this time, the families of the missing women were worried. The sister of Célestine Buisson and the sister of Anna Kalam each tried to find their missing relatives. They both went to the police, but their cases were not connected yet. The police were very busy with the war and did not conduct a major investigation immediately. The families of the missing women did not give up. The sister of Célestine Buisson, named Marie Lacoste, and the sister of Anna Kalam, named Victorine Pellet, were both searching for their relatives. They had each gone to the police separately, but the police had not found anything. By chance, in early 1919, the mayor of Gambais connected the two women. They realized they were looking for the same man, who had used different fake names with each sister. Together, they went back to the police with stronger information. Their complaints eventually reached an inspector in Paris named Jules Bellin. The important break in the case happened on April 11, 1919. A friend of Marie Lacoste was shopping in Paris. She saw Landru on the street with a young woman. The friend recognized Landru from earlier descriptions. She followed them and saw them enter an apartment building. She quickly told Lacoste, who called Inspector Bellin. The next day, on April 12th, Bellin and other officers went to the apartment at 76 Rue de Roquecourt. They arrested Landru there. The young woman with him was his mistress, Fernande Segret. The police searched Landru's apartment and the villa in Gambais. They found many important pieces of evidence. In his apartment, they found identity papers, letters, and bank books belonging to the missing women. They also found a black notebook. In this notebook, Landru had written the names of 283 women he had contacted. He had also made a list of 11 people, 10 women and 1 teenage boy, with careful notes about their money and property. This list matched the known missing victims. At the Gambais villa, the police searched the property thoroughly. In the ashes under the kitchen oven and in a shed, they found small fragments of bone and teeth. A doctor examined these fragments and said they were human, from at least 3 different people. However, the fragments were too small and burned to identify exactly whose they were. The police also dug up the garden. They found the skeletons of 2 small dogs. Landru said they were the dogs of his last victim, and he had buried them when they died. Landru was questioned many times. He never admitted to murder. He said he was a fraudster, not a killer. When police asked where the women were, he would say, "That is my secret." He said the women had simply left, and he did not know where they went. He said the bone fragments could have been from meat or other animals. Because the police could not find any complete bodies, it was a difficult case to prove. Landru's wife and his eldest son were also arrested later because they had helped him sell some furniture and use fake signatures to get money from banks. However, they said they did not know Landru had killed anyone. After many months, they were released because there was no proof they knew about the murders. The trial began on November 7th, 1921, in the city of Versailles. It became a huge public event. People were fascinated by the mysterious case. Special trains brought crowds from Paris to watch. Famous actors and writers came to the courtroom. Landru acted very calm and polite during the trial. He joked with the guards and continued to say he was innocent of murder. The prosecution showed the jury Landru's notebook, the victim's belongings, and the bone fragments. Neighbors testified about the horrible smoke from his chimney. Families of the victims testified that their sisters or daughters would never have left all their property behind willingly. Landru's defense lawyer was very skilled. He argued that without a body, there was no sure proof of murder. He suggested maybe Landru had sent the women away to work in another country. The jury listened to all the evidence for weeks. On November 30th, 1921, they decided. They found Henri Landru guilty of murdering all 11 people listed in his notebook. The vote was not unanimous. It was 9 jurors for guilty and 3 for not guilty. He was also found guilty of many fraud charges. Landru's lawyer asked for a less severe punishment, but the judge sentenced Landru to death. Landru and his lawyer asked the President of France for mercy, but the request was denied. On the morning of February 25th, 1922, Henri Desire Landru was executed by guillotine outside the prison in Versailles. He refused to see a priest or admit to any crimes before he died. After the execution, the story slowly faded from the news. The villa in Gambais was emptied. The famous oven was sold at an auction. Landru's remaining possessions were also sold. The families of the victims tried to move on with their lives, though the loss remained. The case of the careful man who used newspaper ads to find his victims remained one of the most famous crimes in French history. Henri Desire Landru's crimes ended with his execution on that cold morning in 1922. Story 6. Joseph Vacher was born on November 16, 1869, in the small farming village of Beaufort, France. He was the second youngest of 16 children. His parents were much older than most parents. His father was 59 and his mother was 44 when he was born. Joseph had a twin brother named Eugene, but Eugene died as a baby. One of Joseph's older brothers had put a piece of bread in their cradle, and Eugene choked on it. From a very young age, Joseph was known for his bad and violent temper. One time, when other children made fun of him, he took his father's rifle and shot at them. Another time, while he and his younger brother Louis were working on the family farm, Joseph thought Louis was not working hard enough to help push a wheelbarrow. Because of this, Joseph tried to strangle Louis. When Joseph was 14 years old, a 10-year-old boy in a nearby town was raped and murdered in a barn. People at the time blamed unknown vagabonds. However, Joseph Walker would later be suspected of this crime. At age 15, Joseph was sent to live with his half-sister. She found him difficult to handle, so she sent him to a strict religious school run by the Marist brothers. The monks there noted that Joseph tortured animals and masturbated. He was expelled after only 2 years. After his expulsion, Joseph found work in a restaurant and moved in with his sister and her husband. During this time, he contracted the disease syphilis. The illness was serious, and he had to have his left testicle surgically removed in a hospital. When he was 18, he was reported for trying to rape a 12-year-old boy on a farm. The boy fought him off and called for help. Joseph ran away from town to avoid being charged with the crime. His brother-in-law later kicked him out of the house because of his aggressive behavior. Joseph went to Geneva to ask his brother Auguste if he could live with him. He admitted to his brother that he had tried to rape the boy. His brother refused to let him stay. Joseph then lived in Lyon for a time. In 1891, he was placed in a mental asylum for a short period because he was saying he was being persecuted by others. Seeking a way out of his poor life, Joseph joined the French army in 1890. He was a difficult soldier. He stole clothes from other soldiers. He had a very bad temper and fought with others. He made at least 2 attempts to kill superior officers. In one instance, he attacked a corporal with a straight razor. When he failed to hurt the corporal, he tried to kill himself by cutting his own throat. In another instance, he tried to stab a sergeant with a pair of scissors. Despite these actions, he was promoted to the rank of corporal. In the spring of 1893, while stationed in the town of Besançon, Joseph became obsessed with a young housemaid named Louise Barant. He asked her to marry him on their first meeting. She refused because he told her he would kill her if she ever betrayed him. He began to stalk her. He grew paranoid that she was seeing his best friend. After she rejected him again, he went to her home on June 25, 1893. He argued with her, then took out a revolver and shot her 3 times in the head. She survived but was badly injured. Joseph then tried to kill himself by shooting himself in the head twice. Joseph Walker survived his suicide attempt. The bullets severely damaged one side of his face, leaving him permanently disfigured and partially paralyzed. One bullet stayed lodged in his ear. He was found not guilty of the attack on Louise Barant by reason of insanity. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital. He often attacked the staff and tried to escape. Doctors at a second hospital later said he was completely cured and released him on April 1, 1894. He had spent less than 10 months in treatment. On the day he was released, he told a former soldier that he had tricked the doctors into letting him go by pretending his insanity was only temporary. After his release from the hospital in April 1894, Joseph Walker became a drifter. He wandered from town to town across southeastern France. He survived by begging for food or doing short-term work on farms. He was often dirty and wore filthy clothes. His face, disfigured from his self-inflicted gunshot wounds, scared people. He carried a few possessions, an accordion, hiking sticks, and a knife with a leather sheath. On May 19, 1894, near the town of Beaurepaire, Walker attacked a 21-year-old woman named Eugenie Delhomme. She worked in a silk factory and was walking to visit her father. Walker assaulted her, strangled her, and then used his knife to stab her many times in the chest and abdomen. He also violated her body after she was dead. This was his first known murder. He continued to wander. On November 20th, 1894, in a rural area near Vidauban, he found a 13-year-old shepherdess named Louise Marcel watching her sheep. He attacked her, killed her, and mutilated her body with his knife. He then left her in the field. The following spring, on May 12, 1895, in a wooded area near Étals, Vacher came upon 17-year-old Augustine Morchereau, who was tending cattle. He killed her with knife wounds to the neck and chest. He also mutilated her body after death. A farmer who employed her was wrongly suspected of this crime and jailed for 45 days before being released. Between late May and early June of 1895, near Lyon, Vacher killed a 12-year-old shepherd boy named Claudius Beaupied. The boy's body was found with severe knife wounds. Vacher's violence was not limited to the young. On August 24, 1895, in St. Ours, he entered the home of a 68-year-old widow named Perrin Morad. He killed her with a knife. A week later, on August 31st, near the village of Bonances, he found a 16-year-old shepherd named Victor Portelier alone in a field. Vacher attacked him, stabbing him multiple times and mutilating his body. He moved quickly from place to place. On September 21st, 1895, in Saint-Étienne-de-Boulogne, he murdered 14-year-old shepherd Pierre Masset Pellet. 2 days after that, on September 23rd in Trouinus, he killed a 16-year-old shepherdess named Aline Allaise. Both victims were stabbed and mutilated. For almost a year, no murders were linked to him. He traveled widely, often being arrested for vagrancy or minor assaults, but then released. On September 10, 1896, in Bus-Set, he killed 19-year-old shepherdess Marie Lauret. On October 1, 1896, in Varennes-Saint-Honorat, he murdered 14-year-old Rosine Rodier, another shepherdess. He also attempted to attack her 13-year-old brother, Alphonse, who managed to run away. During his travels, people remembered his strange and frightening behavior. In February 1897, he stayed in a hamlet called Calubrac. He showed the children there a knife and told strange stories. He knocked on the door of a woman named Suzanne Cabral. They talked until she mentioned she had inherited some money. He then stared at her in a threatening way, and she scared him off by shouting for her husband. In the same month, in another home, a mother found her 6-year-old daughter sitting on Vacher's knee. He was secretly holding a knife behind the girl's back. He obtained a small dog and a magpie, which he used to perform music while begging. In early August 1897, at a farm, his dog refused to eat. Vacher became angry, grabbed the dog, and killed it by smashing its head against the ground. He did the same to his pet bird. The farmer made him bury the animals and told him to leave. His final violent act occurred on the morning of August 4, 1897, near Champys. Vacher tried to assault a 28-year-old woman named Marie Eugénie Herod, who was gathering pine cones with her children. She fought back and screamed. Her husband, Séraphine Plantier, and several neighbors heard the screams and ran to help. They overpowered Vacher and locked him in a shed. While guarded there for hours, Vacher ranted angrily. He told the men guarding him that he had a right to assault women and that he preferred to attack young shepherdesses. Plantier fetched the police from a nearby town. When they arrived, Vacher was sitting under a tree playing his accordion. He was arrested for the attempted rape of Marie Eugénie Herod. After his arrest in August 1897, Joseph Vacher was first sentenced to 3 months in prison for the attempted rape of Marie Eugénie Herod. However, a judge named Émile Fourquet had been investigating the murder of Augustine Morchereau from 1895. Judge Fourquet believed one person was responsible for several unsolved murders of young shepherds and shepherdesses in the region. He collected files on these crimes from different towns. When he heard about the arrest of a violent vagrant, he suspected this man might be the killer he was looking for. Judge Forquet had Vacher transferred to a prison in Belly for further questioning. The police brought in witnesses from towns where the murders had occurred. 15 people from Bonances, where shepherd Victor Portelier was killed, all identified Vacher as the vagrant they had seen in their area around the time of the murder. Despite these identifications, Vacher strongly denied any involvement in the killings. The police had no physical evidence to directly connect him to the crime scenes. For weeks, Vacher was questioned. Then, on October 7, 1897, he unexpectedly asked to speak to Judge Forquet. He confessed, saying, "I have come to tell you the whole truth. Yes, I am the one who committed all the crimes you have accused me of." He first confessed to 8 murders and later to 11. He described how he would approach his victims in isolated fields, attack them with a knife, and then mutilate their bodies. He said he committed the acts in moments of rage. Following his confession, Vacher changed his story. He claimed he was not guilty by reason of insanity. He said he had been bitten by a rabid dog years earlier, and that the poison from the bite had driven him mad. He also claimed he was on a mission from God. To determine if he was legally sane, a team of doctors, led by a famous professor named Alexander Lacassagne, examined him for 10 months. The doctors studied his life history, his behavior in prison, and his crimes. They concluded that Vacher understood the difference between right and wrong at the time of his murders. They declared him legally sane and responsible for his actions. Joseph Vacher's trial began at the Cour d'Assises in the town of Bourg-en-Bresse on October 26, 1898. He was officially charged with the murder of Victor Portelier. During the trial, the prosecution presented his detailed confessions to 11 murders. Witnesses identified him as being near the crime locations. The psychiatric team presented their finding that he was sane. Vacher continued to argue he was insane, shouting and preaching in the courtroom. The jury found him guilty of murder, and the judge sentenced him to death by guillotine. While waiting for his execution, Vacher tried to escape from his prison cell on January 26, 1898. He attacked a guard with a chair, seriously injuring him, before other guards subdued him. His plea for clemency was rejected. On the morning of December 31, 1898, Joseph Vacher was executed. He refused to walk to the guillotine and had to be dragged by the executioners. A large crowd gathered to witness the execution. After the trial, the families of the victims were left to rebuild their lives, while the man who caused so much terror and loss was finally brought to justice. Story 7. Václav Mrazek was born on October 22, 1925, in a small Czech village named Svinarov. He was one of 12 children in his family. 4 of his brothers and sisters died when they were very young. His family was extremely poor. Their life was very difficult. There was never enough food or warm clothing for everyone. At one point, the family had no proper house. They had to live and sleep in an old railroad car that was not moving. Václav went to primary school. He only finished until the 5th grade. After that, he stopped studying. He needed to help his family, but there were no good jobs. He and his older brother, Karel, started to steal things. They stole food so the family could eat. They stole clothes so they would not be cold. His parents knew about the stealing. They did not stop him. In fact, his father saw that Václav was good at stealing without getting caught. His father forced Václav to teach his younger brothers and sisters how to steal too. In 1941, when Václav was 16 years old, he was finally caught for one of these thefts. The court gave him a conditional sentence. This means he did not go to prison right away, but if he stole again, he would. However, he did steal again. Because of this, he was sent to prison. He served 18 months in a prison for young people. This was his first time in prison. When he was released from prison, he was a young man. He wanted to have an important job. He wanted to be a police officer or a soldier. He tried to join, but he was rejected. The reason was his small physical size. He was not tall or strong enough for them. This rejection made him feel angry and unimportant. In 1946, he found a different job. He enlisted as an armed guard for a humanitarian train convoy. This convoy was taking supplies to Romania and Bulgaria after the war. His job was to carry a gun and protect the supplies on the train. During this trip, he saw other soldiers behaving badly. He later said the soldiers stole from the supply boxes. They traded stolen food and clothes for sexual services from women in the towns they passed. He also said the soldiers would shoot their guns from the moving train at animals or anything they saw, just for fun. Václav participated in some of these activities. He enjoyed holding a gun. It made him feel powerful and in control for the first time in his life. When he returned home, he thought about this trip often. He replayed the memories in his mind for his own pleasure. He started to read pornographic magazines and books. Many of these books had stories about violence and sadism. His sexual desires began to change. They became more violent and unnatural. At one point, he even tried to break into a town morgue. He wanted to have sex with a dead body. He did not succeed, but the thought excited him. In his daily life, he seemed normal to people who did not know him well. He had relationships with women. These women later described him as an average and weak-minded man. They were often annoyed by his extreme thriftiness. He saved every penny and never spent money. This habit came from his childhood of being so poor. He eventually had a long-term partner. He lived with her, and they had several children together. He had a full-time job working in a factory. To his neighbors and co-workers, he was a quiet, inconspicuous man who went to work and came home. Václav Mrazek lived a double life. To his family and co-workers, he was a normal factory worker. But during his free time, he often took long walks around the city of Komyatov and the nearby forests. On these walks, he would see young women walking alone. These sights created a powerful and violent compulsion in him. He felt a strong urge to sexually assault them. The urge was so intense that it caused him physical pain, like a severe headache. He believed the only way to make the pain stop was to act on his desires. His first murder happened on August 22, 1951. He was in a forest near the village of Drahanis. He saw a 15-year-old girl named Hanna Klebova. She was alone, grazing cows. Mrazek picked up a heavy wooden stick. He walked up to Hanna and beat her to death with the stick. After she was dead, he dragged her body to a more hidden place in the forest. There, he had sex with her corpse. He left the body there. The police investigated this crime, but they did not connect it to Mrazek or any other crimes at that time. Less than a month later, on September 16, 1951, Mrazek chose a different method. He now owned a pistol. On a road between the towns of Jerkov and Kajis, he saw a 32-year-old woman named Bronislava Padrakova. He shot her 3 times with his pistol, killing her. The sound of the gunshots was very loud. The noise frightened Mrazek. He quickly dragged Bronislava's body to a nearby stream. He had sex with the corpse there. Afterward, he pushed the body into the water. The police found her and knew it was a murder, but they had no suspects. The loud gunshots worried Mrazek. He decided to use a quieter weapon for his next attacks. He began carrying a knife. He attacked 2 different women on separate occasions with the knife. Both women survived. In the first attack, the knife hit the young woman's jawbone and did not cause a fatal wound. In the second attack, he stabbed a girl 18 times, but the wounds were shallow because he was not strong and the girl fought back. Because the wounds were not deep, and because the survivors described the attacker as short and having a higher-pitched voice, the police briefly considered the possibility that the attacker might be a woman. On June 1, 1952, Mrazek passed by a pub where a dance was happening. Seeing the young women dancing excited his violent urges again. he decided to use his gun once more. First, he stole a bicycle that was left unattended outside the pub. He rode the bicycle to look for a victim. He found 19-year-old Elena Murmanova walking alone. He shot at her 3 times from his bicycle. The first bullet went through her coat collar and her hair. Surprised, Elena ducked. The second bullet went through the back of her coat. She fell to the ground. Mrazek got off the bicycle and walked closer to finish the attack. However, when he tried to fire a 3rd time, the bullet got stuck in the gun's barrel. During the excitement of the shooting, he had already ejaculated in his pants. Because of this, he lost interest in killing Elena. He left her on the ground and rode away on the stolen bicycle. Elena Murmanova was shocked but alive. The next morning, she looked at her coat and saw the real bullet holes. She realized her attacker had a real gun, not a toy. She went back to the place where she was attacked. There, she noticed marks on the ground that looked like something had been dragged. She followed the marks into a field. There, she found the dead body of 16-year-old Marie Dvorokova. Mrazek had killed Marie about 1 hour after attacking Elena. Marie had been waiting for a friend on the road when Mrazek found her. He shot her once, killing her. He checked that no one had heard the shot. Then he dragged Marie's body into the field. He used his knife to cut off all her clothes. He had sex with her corpse. After he was finished, he did a strange thing. He covered his own head with pieces of Marie's clothing and put her shoes on his feet. The murder of Marie Dvorokova created great fear in the area. The police increased their efforts, but they found no good clues. Mrazek continued his normal life and his job, so no one suspected him. His next murder was on July 14, 1954. He saw 16-year-old Jarina Helmakova walking home from a forest near Cernus. He got off his bicycle and called out to her. When Jarina turned around, he shot her directly in the face, killing her. He then had sex with her body in the forest. The police formed special investigative teams, but they had no success. Mrazek was careful and left no evidence. On August 9, 1955, Mrazek was walking on a road between Komyatov and Brezinek. He saw a couple, 19-year-old Lyubuz Dufkova and her 26-year-old boyfriend, Kirill Trelifage. Mrazek took out his gun and shot Kirill 3 times. He killed him. He then went through Kirill's pockets and stole his money and watch. He threw Kirill's body into a ditch and covered it with plants. Lyubuz had also been shot at. She fell down and pretended to be dead. When she thought Mrazek had left, she got up and tried to run away. Mrazek saw her running. He chased her and shot her in the back, killing her. He dragged Lyubuz's body to a nearby field and had sex with her corpse. The double murder shocked the entire region. The police in Czechoslovakia formed a special national task force for the first time in history. It was named the Bronislava Task Force, after the first known gun murder victim. This force investigated over 25,000 possible suspects. They arrested many other wanted criminals and collected many weapons. However, because Mrazek had a steady job, a family, and acted normally, his name never appeared on their list of serious suspects. After this, Mrazek changed his method again. He stopped using his gun for a while, fearing the attention. He tried to strangle several women. All of these women survived the attacks and were able to call for help. He also began raping very young girls, some as young as 6 years old. He did not kill these child victims. He later said he thought killing them was useless. After one attack on a child, angry people in the area almost caught him. He ran away just in time. He learned about the police investigations from 2 sources. He had friends who worked for the police, and he had subordinates at his factory who talked about the news. Hearing how actively the police were searching for him made him afraid. He decided to move away to lower the suspicion on him. He got a new job and moved to a city called Kladno. Due to an error by a clerk, his name was accidentally left off the list of people who were supposed to be questioned about the murders when he moved. On November 9, 1956, in Kladno, Mrazek decided to commit a robbery. He knew a man named Ladislav Barin. He had heard rumors that the Barin family kept money in their house. Mrazek planned to break in at night when he thought Ladislav was at work. He broke a window to get into the house. However, Ladislav was home. It was Ladislav's 57-year-old wife, Alzbita Barin, who heard the noise and came to investigate. She saw Mrazek clearly and shouted his first name, Vaslav. Surprised and panicked that she recognized him, Mrazek grabbed an axe he had taken from the yard. He had only brought the axe to break into the house. He used it to kill Alzbita Barin. After killing her, he found their 11-year-old daughter, Jarmila, in the house. He forced her to show him where the family kept their money and valuables. After he stole these things, he raped the young girl. Before he left, he covered his face with a cloth so Jarmila could not identify him. He then escaped from the house. After the crime at the Barin house, Vaslav Mrazek continued his life in Kladno. He worked at a new job as a spa staff attendant at a mine in the nearby town of Libusin. At this mine, workers would change their clothes in a shared locker room. A series of small thefts began occurring in this locker room. Workers would find money or personal items missing from their pockets. On March 17, 1957, a miner who had injured his hand returned to the locker room early. He caught Mrazek in the act of going through another worker's jacket. The miner reported him to the mine officials, and they called the local police. Mrazek was arrested for these thefts. Because he was now a suspect in a crime, the police obtained a warrant to search his home in Kladno. The police search of his apartment began as a routine look for stolen items from the mine. However, they quickly found that the entire apartment was filled with stolen goods. There were piles of clothes, tools, household items, and other objects that had no clear use for him. Among these many items, an officer found a hair clipper. This hair clipper was noted in the police records as having been stolen from the Barin family home during the murder and robbery months earlier. Finding an item linked to a major unsolved murder changed the search completely. The police now searched every part of the apartment with extreme care. They went down into the cellar of the building. In the cellar, they found a table that belonged to Mrazek. One of the table legs was hollow. Inside this hollow leg, they discovered a Walther PP pistol, carefully hidden and wrapped in cloth. The police sent the pistol to a ballistics laboratory. Experts test-fired the gun and compared the bullets to those recovered from the murder scenes around Komutov years earlier. The markings on the bullets matched perfectly. The gun found in Mrazek's cellar was the weapon used to kill Bronislava Padjarkova, Marie Dvorikova, Jarina Helmakova, Karel Trlifage, and Libuš Dufkova. Confronted with this evidence, Mrazek first only admitted to the minor thefts from the mine locker room. He was placed in a jail cell. His cellmate was secretly a police informant. Mrazek did not confess any details to this cellmate. He remained silent about the murders for several days. Then, the investigators told him the results of the ballistics test. They told him they had scientific proof his gun was the murder weapon. Upon hearing this, Mrazek broke down emotionally. He began to cry and then confessed to all the murders. He gave a full confession, detailing each of the 7 murders he committed. He also confessed to the attempted murders, the attacks with a knife, and the rapes, including the rape of the young girl Jarmila Barin. He explained his methods and the reasons for changing them. He told police that seeing his victims fall gave him a greater feeling of power than the sexual acts that followed. He also stated that he hated the sight of blood, which was why he often used a gun from a distance. His trial was swift. He was formally charged and convicted for 7 counts of murder, for counts of attempted murder, and 14 counts of rape, among many other crimes like theft and burglary. The total number of crimes he was convicted of was 127. Mrazek was surprised by the severity of the sentence. He incorrectly believed the death penalty did not exist in Czechoslovakia at that time. He expected to receive a maximum prison sentence of 10 years. The court sentenced Václav Mrazek to death by hanging. The sentence was carried out on December 29, 1957, at Pankrak prison in Prague. After his execution, a death mask was made of his face, and an autopsy was performed on his body, as was standard procedure. The following day, his remains were cremated at the Model crematorium. In a separate trial, his brother Karel Mrazek, who had participated in thefts with Václav during their youth and later, was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his role in those crimes. The families of the victims received closure, but no compensation for their loss. The crimes of Václav Mrazek ended with his execution on a cold December day. Story 8. Futoshi Matsunaga was born on April 28, 1961, in Kokurikita Ward. This area is part of the city of Kitakyushu in Fukuoka Prefecture, Japan. He did not grow up in the city of his birth. His family moved to the city of Yanagawa, where he spent his childhood and youth. During his school years, Matsunaga was academically successful. He received good grades in his classes. He also had a personality that many people found pleasant and engaging. He could be charming when he wanted to be. However, alongside this, he often showed behavioral problems. He had issues with discipline and authority. These problems became serious enough during high school that he was forced to transfer to a different school. The reason for this transfer was his involvement in a relationship with a girl who was still in junior high school, which was considered inappropriate. At the very young age of 19, Matsunaga got married. His wife soon gave birth to a son, making Matsunaga a father. Despite being a married man, he did not remain faithful. He began to have relationships with other women. Over time, he had at least 10 different mistresses while he was still married. In October of 1982, one of these mistresses became particularly important. Her name was Junko Ogata. Matsunaga knew Junko from their earlier school days in Yanagawa. They began a relationship. By 1984, Matsunaga promised Junko that he would marry her. However, Junko's mother, Shizumi Ogata, strongly disapproved. Shizumi did not like Matsunaga because she saw that he was abusive toward her daughter. In response to this disapproval, Matsunaga raped Shizumi Ogata in 1984. This was an act of violence and control. The following year, in 1985, Matsunaga took further steps to isolate Junko from her family. Junko had attempted suicide. Matsunaga used this event to manipulate her. He convinced Junko that her family's concern was actually hatred. He told her that her family did not care about her because of the suicide attempt. Believing him, Junko decided to leave her family. She moved in with Matsunaga, cutting ties with her parents and sister. Also in 1985, Matsunaga started a business. He bought a building where he planned to run a futon store. This business was on the first floor. The upper floors were used for other purposes. On the third floor of this building, Matsunaga began to do strange and cruel things to his employees. He used an electric shock device on them. He would shock them as a form of punishment or control. Matsunaga also started to say strange things to people around him. He would suddenly shout at men. He would tell a man that there was an evil spirit standing behind him. He said the spirit was stealing the man's luck and fortune. He began to use words from religious beliefs like kami, which means God or spirit, and samsara, which refers to the cycle of life and death. This made people around him uneasy. By the year 1992, Matsunaga had obtained a large sum of money illegally. He had stolen about 180 million yen. He got this money through fraud and blackmail. He would trick people or threaten them to give him money. Because of these crimes, the police were looking for him. Matsunaga and Junko Ogata ran away to avoid being caught. Their names and faces were put on a list of Japan's most wanted criminals. After being placed on the wanted list, Matsunaga and Junko Ogata continued to live secretly. They moved into a condominium in Kokurakita-ku. It was here that the acts of fraud escalated into much more serious crimes. In April 1993, Matsunaga targeted a married woman who had 3 children. He used his charm to get close to her. He convinced her to leave her husband and run away with him. To explain Junko's presence, he told the woman that Junko was his sister. The woman and her children moved into Matsunaga's condominium. During their time together, Matsunaga defrauded this woman of 11.8 million yen. He used various lies to get her money. In September 1993, one of her children died. The circumstances were not clear. The following month, the woman's 2 remaining children went to live with their father and grandfather. In March 1994, the woman herself died under mysterious circumstances. The police looked into these deaths, but could not find enough proof to show Matsunaga was responsible for killing the woman or her child. Next, Matsunaga found a new target. Later in 1994, he began to victimize a man named Kumio Toraya and Toraya's young daughter. Toraya had once confided in Matsunaga about crimes he had committed in his past. Matsunaga used this secret information to blackmail Toraya. He threatened to tell the police about Toraya's past if Toraya did not obey him. Matsunaga then forced Toraya and his daughter to come live in his apartment. Once they were inside, they were not allowed to leave. They were captives. Matsunaga began to torture Kumio Toraya. His main method was using electric shocks. He had a device that could deliver painful shocks. He used this on Toraya frequently. The torture also included forcing Toraya to eat his own feces. Matsunaga also forced Toraya's daughter to participate in the abuse. He made the girl bite her own father. This torture went on for nearly 2 years. Kumio Toraya died from this sustained abuse on February 26, 1996. After Toraya died, Matsunaga told Toraya's daughter that she was the one who had killed her father. He said her actions had caused his death. He then instructed Junko Ogata and the traumatized girl to get rid of the body. They pulverized the remains, turned them into small pieces, and threw them into the sea near the Kunisaki Peninsula. Shortly after this, Matsunaga looked for another source of money. He contacted a female acquaintance of Kumio Toraya. He introduced himself to this woman with a lie. He said he was a graduate of Kyoto University, which is a very respected school. He also promised to marry her. The woman believed him. Through this relationship, Matsunaga defrauded her of 5.6 million yen. Just like before, he then confined the woman and her daughter in his apartment. They were held against their will. In March 1997, the woman saw a chance to escape. She jumped from the second-floor window of the apartment. She survived the jump, but was seriously injured. She was later placed in a mental hospital for care. Her daughter was released from the captivity. In April 1997, Junko Ogata briefly left the apartment to go to work. She did not return. Matsunaga was angry. He contacted Junko's family. He threatened them. He specifically blackmailed Junko's mother, Shizumi, by reminding her of the rape he had committed against her in 1984. He then created a trick. He faked his own suicide. He made it seem like he had killed himself. When Junko heard this news, she returned to the apartment. When she returned, Matsunaga subjected her to increased abuse and control. He also raped Junko's married sister, Riko Ogata. Through fear and blackmail, Matsunaga forced Junko's entire family to give him 63 million yen. After he had their money, he did not let them go. Instead, he brought Junko's parents, her sister Riko, Riko's husband Kanzuya, and their 2 young children into his apartment. They all became captives. Matsunaga used strong psychological control over them. He dictated every part of their lives. He used methods similar to those used by leaders of dangerous cults. He decided who could eat, sleep, or speak. On December 21st, 1997, Matsunaga ordered Junko to use the electric shock device on her own father, Takashi Jogata. Junko, under his command, shocked her father repeatedly until he was at the point of death. He died from these injuries. When Junko's mother, Shizumi, saw this and was under severe stress, her mental state broke down. On January 20th, 1998, Matsunaga commanded Riko and her husband Kinzuya to strangle Shizumi. They did so because they were terrified of Matsunaga. Several weeks later, Matsunaga gave another order. He commanded Kinzuya to strangle his own wife, Riko. At the same time, Matsunaga forced Riko and Kinzuya's 10-year-old daughter, Aya, to hold her mother down. After Riko was killed, Matsunaga and Junko locked Kinzuya in a bathroom. He was left there with no food and no way out. Kinzuya starved to death in that bathroom on April 13, 1998. Next, Matsunaga forced Junko Ogata and the 10-year-old girl, Aya, to kill Riko's 5-year-old son, Yuki. They did this under his threats. Afterwards, Matsunaga then focused on Aya, the only child left. He and Junko tortured Aya with electric shocks. On June 7, 1998, Matsunaga forced Kumio Toraya's daughter, who was still a captive, to strangle Aya. After each of these murders, Matsunaga and Junko would dispose of the bodies. They cut the bodies into pieces. They boiled the pieces in large pots. They then pulverized the remains and flushed them down the toilet or threw them into the sea. Throughout all of this, Matsunaga consistently told Junko that the murders were her fault. He said she was the one responsible. After the murder of Aya Ogata in June 1998, Futoshi Matsunaga and Junko Ogata remained at large for several more years. They continued their pattern of fraud. In July 2000, Matsunaga met another woman. He used his usual promise of marriage to lure her. He convinced her to leave her life and go with him. In August 2001, this woman gave her twin children to Matsunaga and Junko to care for. Matsunaga and Junko then convinced the woman to give them 20 million yen. They told her the money was necessary to raise her children properly. During all this time, the daughter of Kumio Toraya was still being held captive by Matsunaga and Junko. She was now a teenager. On January 30th, 2002, she saw a moment when Matsunaga was not watching her closely. She used this moment to run away from the apartment. However, Matsunaga found her again on February 15th. He captured her and took her back. As punishment for escaping, he tortured her with electric shocks. On March 6, 2002, the girl saw another chance to escape. She took it and ran away again. This time, she went directly to a police station. She was 17 years old. She reported everything that had happened to her, her father, and the Ogata family. She told the police about the years of captivity, the torture, and the murders. The next day, March 7th, the police set a plan. They knew Matsunaga might come looking for the girl. When Matsunaga and Junko arrived at a location to try and retrieve the girl, the police were waiting. They arrested both of them. The police also took the twin children and Matsunaga and Junko's own 2 children into protective custody. The police began a full investigation. The main challenge was a lack of physical evidence. The bodies of all the victims had been completely destroyed. The remains had been pulverized and disposed of in the sea or down toilets. Therefore, the police could not find any bones or DNA evidence. The investigation relied heavily on the testimonies of the people who had survived. The key witnesses were Kumio Toraya's daughter and Junko Ogata's daughter. These girls provided detailed accounts of the events inside the apartment. Junko Ogata cooperated with the police. She calmly confessed to her own role in the crimes. She explained how Matsunaga had controlled her and forced her to participate. Futoshi Matsunaga, however, denied everything. He insisted that the stories were fabricated by the women. He claimed they were lying about him. Based on the evidence and testimonies, prosecutors brought formal charges. The charges were filed separately for each victim. On September 18, 2002, Matsunaga and Ogata were charged with the murder of Aya Ogata. On October 12th, they were charged with the murder of Takashi Ogata. Charges for the murders of Shizumi Ogata, Yuki Ogata, Kumio Toraya, Riko Ogata, and Kanzuya Ogata followed over the next several months. No murder charges were brought against Kumio Toraya's daughter, as she was seen as a victim who had been forced to participate. The trial took place in the Fukuoka District Court. In court, the horrifying details of psychological control, torture, and murder were presented. The prosecution argued that Matsunaga was the mastermind who directed all the crimes. On September 28, 2005, the court gave its verdict. Futoshi Matsunaga was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Junko Ogata was also initially sentenced to death. Both defendants appealed the verdict to a higher court, the Fukuoka High Court. On September 26, 2007, this court made a new ruling. It upheld the death sentence for Futoshi Matsunaga. However, it changed the sentence for Junko Ogata. Her sentence was reduced from death to life in prison. The judges decided that Matsunaga had exerted such total control over Junko that she was not fully responsible for her actions, though she was still guilty for her part in the crimes. Futoshi Matsunaga remains on death row in Japan, awaiting execution. Junko Ogata is serving her life sentence in prison. The surviving victims, including Kumio Toraya's daughter and Junko's daughter, were given protection and support to rebuild their lives after the trial ended. Story 9. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21, 1962, in a part of Tokyo called Itsukaichi. He was born premature. He had a rare birth defect called radioulnar synostosis. This meant the bones in his forearms were joined together. Because of this, his wrists were stiff, and he could not bend his hands upward. This physical difference was visible and would affect his whole life. His family was wealthy and well-respected in the town. They owned and operated a local newspaper company. His grandfather and great-grandfather had served on the town council, so people knew the family name. His parents were often busy with the family business. Because of this, Tsutomu was not raised mainly by his parents. He spent a lot of time with his grandfather, whom he liked very much. The family also hired a man with an intellectual disability to help as a nanny. This man helped look after Tsutomu when he was young. When Tsutomu started elementary school, the other children noticed his hands. They treated him differently because of his deformity. He was often left out and bullied. He did not have friends. Because he was rejected by the other children, he learned to be alone. He kept to himself and became a very quiet and shy person. He attended a good high school named Meidai Nakano High School. This school was known for being prestigious. At first, he did very well in his studies and was a star student. But over time, his grades began to fall. By the end of high school, he was ranked 40th out of 56 students in his class. Because his grades dropped, he did not get the automatic admission to Meiji University that other students from his school usually received. His first plan was to study English and become a teacher. After his grades fell, this plan was no longer possible. Instead of going to a university, he went to a local junior college. There, he studied to become a photography technician. This is a person who develops film and handles photo equipment. In the mid-1980s, after he finished his college studies, he moved back into his parents' house in Itsukaichi. He shared a room with his older sister. His family was still influential, but he showed no interest in taking over the newspaper business. He did not have a clear career path. He felt emotionally distant from his parents. He later said he believed his parents cared more about material things and business than about his feelings. He felt they would not listen to his problems. The person he felt closest to was his grandfather. He did not get along with his two younger sisters and felt rejected by them. During this time, he began to feel very sad and depressed. He started to think about suicide. In May 1988, when Tsutomu was 25 years old, his grandfather died. This made his depression much worse. He felt more isolated than ever. In an attempt to feel connected to his grandfather, he did something unusual. He ate a small part of his grandfather's cremated ashes. A few weeks after his grandfather's death, one of his younger sisters found him watching her while she was taking a shower. She told him to leave. He became angry and attacked her. When his mother found out about this incident, she was angry. She told him he should work more and spend less time watching his large collection of videotapes. He then attacked his mother as well. After attacking his mother, Tsutomu Miyazaki's actions escalated. He began using his car, a black Nissan Langley, to drive around. He looked for opportunities to be alone with young girls. His first crime happened on August 22, 1988, the day after his 26th birthday. He was in Saitama, a prefecture next to Tokyo. He saw a 4-year-old girl named Mari Kano playing outside a friend's house. He approached her and convinced her to come to his car. He then drove her to a wooded area west of Tokyo. He parked under a bridge where it was secluded. He sat in the car with Mari for about 30 minutes. He then killed her. After she was dead, he sexually molested her corpse. He then removed all her clothing. He put her body in the hills near his own home and left it there. He took her clothes with him. He waited for the body to decompose for several weeks. Later, he returned to the hills. He removed Mari Kano's hands and feet from the remains. He took these body parts back to his bedroom closet and kept them. He gathered the rest of her bones, burned them in his home's furnace, and ground them into a powder. He put some of this powder, along with a few of her teeth, into a small box. He also put in photographs of her clothes and a postcard. He mailed this box to Mari Kano's family. The postcard had a written message that said, "Mari, bones, cremated, investigate, prove." On October 3, 1988, Miyazaki was driving along a quiet road. He saw a 7-year-old girl named Masami Yoshizawa walking alone. He stopped his car and offered her a ride. She accepted. He drove her to the same wooded area under the bridge where he had taken Mari Kano. He killed Masami Yoshizawa there. He then molested her dead body. He took her clothes when he left. He disposed of her body in a different location. On December 12, 1988, Miyazaki saw a 4-year-old girl named Erika Namba walking home from a friend's house. He forced her into his car. This time, he drove to a public parking lot in an area called Naguri. He made her take off her clothes in the back seat of the car. He took photographs of her. He then killed her. After killing her, he tied her hands and feet together behind her back. He covered her body with a bedsheet. He put her body in the trunk of his car. He drove to a wooded area and threw her clothes away. He then returned to the parking lot and left her body there. Her body was found 3 days later. On December 20th, her family received a strange postcard. The message was made from words cut out of magazines. It said, "Erika, cold, cough, throat, rest, death." His final crime happened on June 6, 1989. He met a 5-year-old girl named Ayako Nemoto. He convinced her that he wanted to take her picture. She agreed. He led her to his car and killed her. He placed her body in the trunk of his car, covered with a bedsheet. This time, he did not leave the body outside. He drove her body to his own apartment. He kept her corpse in his room for 2 days. During this time, he sexually molested the body repeatedly. He took many photographs and also made video recordings of the corpse. He posed the body in different positions. After 2 days, the body began to decompose and smell. He then dismembered the body. He cut off the head and the torso. He placed her torso in a nearby cemetery. He placed her head in some hills. He kept her hands. He drank blood from the severed hands and also ate small pieces of flesh from them. 2 weeks later, he became worried the police would find the body parts. He went back to the cemetery in the hills. He collected the torso and the head. He brought them back to his apartment. He hid all of Ayako Nemoto's remains in his bedroom closet with the other body parts he had saved. During this time, the police were investigating the deaths of the young girls. They knew a serial killer was likely responsible because the victims were similar and the methods had similarities. However, they had no strong leads. They did not know who Miyazaki was or where he lived. The public was frightened, and the case was widely reported in the news. The police were under pressure, but had not yet connected the crimes to Miyazaki. The break in the case happened on July 23, 1989. Miyazaki was in a park in Hakioji, Tokyo. He saw 2 young sisters playing. He managed to separate the younger sister from the older one. He convinced the younger girl to take her clothes off so he could take photographs of her. While he was doing this, the girl's father arrived at the park. The father saw what was happening and immediately attacked Miyazaki. During the struggle, Miyazaki got away and ran from the park on foot. The father could not hold him. The father quickly called the police. He gave them a description of Miyazaki and his car, which was still parked near the park. Miyazaki, after running away, decided to return to the park later to get his car. When he came back, police officers were waiting for him. They arrested him at the scene for attempted indecent behavior with a minor. Because Miyazaki was now a suspect in a crime, the police began to look into his background. They got a warrant to search his small, 2-room apartment. Inside, they found a very large collection of videotapes. There were 5,763 tapes in total. The tapes included anime, horror movies, and pornographic films. Among these ordinary tapes, the police found homemade videos and photographs. These showed the crimes against the 4 murdered girls. The police also searched his bedroom closet. There, they discovered the preserved hands and feet of Mari Kano and the remains of Ayako Nemoto. Confronted with this evidence, Miyazaki confessed to the 4 murders. He explained his methods and what he had done with the bodies. During his questioning and later at his trial, he often spoke in a calm and emotionless way. He showed little feeling about what he had done. At times, he gave strange explanations for his crimes. He claimed that an imaginary creature he called Rat Man had told him to commit the murders. He would draw pictures of this Rat Man character during court hearings. The court trial began on March 30th, 1990. The main question for the court was whether Miyazaki was mentally sane and therefore legally responsible for his actions. Japanese law states that a person who is insane cannot be punished. The court appointed 3 separate teams of psychiatric experts to examine Miyazaki. The teams came to different conclusions. One team said he had a cognitive disability. Another team said he had schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. The third team said he had personality disorders but understood right from wrong and was sane. Because the experts disagreed, the judges had to decide. The Tokyo District Court listened to all the evidence. The judges looked at the careful planning of the crimes, his actions to avoid capture, and the taunting messages he sent to the families. The court decided that Miyazaki knew his actions were wrong and understood their consequences. They found him legally sane and responsible. On April 14, 1997, he was found guilty of all murders and sentenced to death by hanging. Miyazaki's lawyers appealed the decision to a higher court, the Tokyo High Court. They argued again that he was not mentally well. The High Court reviewed the case and agreed with the first court's decision. They upheld the death sentence on June 28, 2001. His lawyers made a final appeal to the Supreme Court of Japan. The Supreme Court also agreed with the guilty verdict and the death sentence. They made this final decision on January 17, 2006. After the Supreme Court decision, the execution date was set by the Minister of Justice. On June 17, 2008, the minister, Kunio Hatoyama, signed the death warrant. That same day, at the Tokyo Detention House, Tsutomu Miyazaki was executed by hanging. The families of the victims had to live with their loss forever. The crimes caused widespread fear and anger across Japan. When the media reported on Miyazaki's large collection of anime and horror videos, they called him the otaku murderer. This label created a strong negative stereotype and a moral panic against young people who were fans of anime and manga, known as otaku, for many years after the crimes. Tsutomu Miyazaki was executed for his crimes, bringing a final end to the case.